the documentary The Amazon Awakens, an excerpt that was made by Walt Disney but commissioned by the U.S. Coordinator of Inter-American Affairs. Greg Grandin, author of Fordlandia. Walt Disney, he visited?
Yes, he visited prior to making this documentary. They were friends, Henry Ford and Walt Disney, and there was even evidence that some of the attractions in Disneyland in California were actually based on an experience in Fordlandia, the Tropical Bell steamship ride, riverboat ride.
And what ultimately happened to the town? Because at least this documentary seems to portray all of the residents as very happy with their surroundings.
You know, let me say that Ford spent about $1 billion in inflation-adjusted dollars on this project, and not one drop of latex made it into a Ford car. It was an absolute failure, and the more it failed, the more this is also a resonance with recent history. The more it failed, the more he justified it in idealistic terms. Not unlike in some ways the Iraq War. The more he failed to find weapons of mass destruction, the more it becomes a civilizational mission to bring democracy to the Middle East. The same thing with Fordlandia. There were riots, and workers rebelled against this attempt to impose Ford-style regimentation. One worker called it resisting being turned into 365-day machines. And then, of course, the environmental aspect of it. Ford basically, by planting rubber trees so close together in the Amazon, Ford basically created a large incubator. Caterpillars and pests and blight just devastated the plantation. The more it failed, the more money that was poured into it.
And the people who were in the Amazon, the response there, the natives of the Brazilian Amazon?
Well, they did resist that heavy attempt to regulate every aspect of their lives, not just the industrial regime, but also their diet, their sanitation and medical regulation. And during one riot in particular, when they smashed all the time clocks. This was a particularly symbolic rebellion against Midwestern industrialization.
And how you look today at the demise of the auto industry in the United States, the issue of globalization, how the Amazon, so many have tried to conquer it, corporations, right through to the Peruvian uprising recently in the Amazon, where indigenous people were killed protesting, opening it to exploitation.
The story has a lot of resonance with today. I mean, one of the things I like to say about the book is that it wasn't Fordlandia is a story of arrogance, but the arrogance isn't that Ford thought he could tame the Amazon. He was actually kind of indifferent to the Amazon. He thought he could tame capitalism. Embedded in Ford imagined Fordism to be this very powerful integrating mechanism. High wages would create large markets and happy workers, and everybody would be happy. But I think embedded in Fordism was also the seeds of its undoing, that by breaking down the industrial process to ever smaller components, beginning in the factory as Ford did, but then eventually throughout the larger global economy, you could break that link between high wages and large markets. You can make goods in one place and then sell them somewhere else, and it doesn't matter. Your market share isn't dependent on creating prosperous, happy workers. And Fordlandia, in some ways, is very resonant with this. Just you go to Fordlandia, and there's almost a yearning for this kind of holistic capitalism, a kind of paternal capitalism or developmentalism, where industries cared about what happened to workers in terms of education, in terms of health care. But you go 300 miles east of Fordlandia, and there's this city of Manaus, which is the fastest growing city in Brazil. It's a free trade port in the middle of the Amazon. It kind of sprawls out like some kind of perverse Oz eating away at the jungle. And nearly every major electronics corporation, Nokia, Sony, Sanyo, Harley-Davidson, and other Honda, have assembly plants there where they assemble brand name products for sale elsewhere in Latin America. So it's a perfect example of how Fordism has been extended globally. So you have this nice two contrasts, Fordlandia and Manaus, side by side.
Greg Grandin, thank you very much for being with us. His latest book is Fordlandia, The Rise and Fall of Henry Ford's Forgotten Jungle City. This is Democracy Now! Back in a minute.
Thanks. Thanks. It was fun.
One day Henry Ford went down, built his very own new town, the only one for miles around in the middle of the Amazon. Hospitals and factories, 250,000 rubber trees, gonna beat that European squeeze. days